We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to eradicating human slavery, human trafficking, child exploitation, and child sexual abuse material through disrupting networks and applying data, technology, and advanced analytics and intelligence.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative's third annual Follow Money Fight Slavery Virtual Summit. Some information, the ATII has a consortium known as the ATII Cryptocurrency Consortium that's focused specifically on investigating and combating the use of digital assets in human trafficking. We've got an incredibly good panel today of experts in this area. They're going to talk to you a little bit about how the digital assets institutions are joining the traditional finance institutions in the fight against human trafficking. Along the way, we may give you a little bit of cryptocurrency one-on-one, just so that you understand the different risks, the different mitigants, and the different businesses that's involved, which I think might be useful to you in understanding how this part of the financial services industry helps fight human trafficking. So with that, I'm going to let this incredibly good panel introduce themselves. First is Courtland Hillman, who's the Director of Financial Crime Compliance and the BSA Officer at Coinbase. And gentlemen, why don't you talk a little bit about your institution and where it plays in the digital assets ecosystem as you introduce yourselves.
Great, thanks, Alma. Hi everyone, glad to be here today. As Alma mentioned, my name is Courtland Hillman. I'm the BSA officer and director in FCC at Coinbase. I've been there for about 2.5 years, and I'm within our financial crime compliance org, of course. Excited to talk to you all today. So Coinbase, as I think many people know, is an exchange where you can buy, sell, send, and receive cryptocurrency, as well as store it. And so our role is really as a middleman for the transactions within the ecosystem. And because of that, we're able to see a lot of information. We're regulated as a money services business. We participate in 314A and 314B, just like a lot of other traditional financial institutions. So happy to talk to you all today. I'll kick it back over to you.
Thanks. Seth Sattler, who's the Chief Compliance Officer at DigitalMint. Seth, over to you.
Yeah, and thanks for introducing me, and happy to be here. Appreciate ATI having us. Yeah, so as I said, I'm Seth Sattler. I'm the Chief Compliance Officer over at DigitalMint. We are a Bitcoin ATM company, so a bit different than the other two panelists here with me. So we are non-custodial. We have no accounts. We don't hold coin for anyone. We basically, our entire business model is converting fiat currency, so cash, into crypto, almost primarily just Bitcoin. Yeah, so we have a little over 700 machines in states scattered across the US. So yeah, we definitely see the activity, or have been made aware that the activity we're going to be talking about today exists in our platforms and is exposed, or the crypto ATM space is exposed to it. So hopefully we're able to help the industry detect it and prevent it better today.
Thank you, Seth. And last but not least, Chris Shimizu is the Senior Manager for Compliance Programs at Bittrex.
Thanks, Alma. Yeah, so my name's Chris. I'm the Senior Manager of Compliance Programs at Bittrex, which means I kind of oversee the day-to-day operations of our BSA AML program, which also includes our anti-fraud program. Bittrex Inc. is an exchange similar to Coinbase. We're registered with FinCEN, state licensing agencies, 314A and B as well. But looking forward to kind of participating in this discussion with everyone here.
So to start out, I mean, we've all read the recent FinCEN guidance and the GAO report talking about the increased use of digital assets in human trafficking. Now, to start out, though, I think sometimes it's important to level set. There are a couple of myths around digital assets that I want everyone to focus on. While there's some, shall we call it, definitional uncertainty around the classification of digital assets, they're not unregulated, particularly in the area of anti-money laundering compliance, because from very early on, as Court said, FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, regulated most digital assets companies as money transmitters. So the AML part of the ecosystem is probably the most buttoned up from a regulatory standpoint. The other myth is that they're anonymous. And while digital assets are pseudo-anonymous because the blockchain is fully public, there's a lot of information that the gentlemen on this panel see about the transactions that come through their exchange, in some ways, sometimes more than people dealing with fiat currency. So with that as an introduction, because we have different business models here, I think it'll be interesting to talk about the different kinds of red flags for human trafficking that you see in your institutions. And Seth, it might be interesting for folks for you to kick this part off.
Yeah, absolutely. And we so it's interesting being a crypto ATM company when addressing this activity. Excuse me. Because unlike Coinbase and Bittrex, where there's not the physical aspect of a customer interacting with your platform, with ATMs, we have individuals walking up to our machine or our tower locations around the country. So what we're able to do is see who is interacting. Is it a female with a male behind them? Is it multiple females utilizing the same account? Is it a male utilizing a female ID? So there's red flags that you have with traditional human trafficking and prostitution that we're able to see through either the security footage on our ATMs or with our tellers in real time interacting with the customers. So it's a unique perspective we have. And then we obviously do have the red flags associated to the on-chain activity. So where the money's going. Is it going overseas? Is it going to escort ads and known escort services online and wallets associated to that? So we do have those red flags, but we definitely have that unique, I guess, insight into the real time who's interacting with our machines.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That is much more like the red flags that apply to a lot of traditional brick and mortar kinds of businesses. So Court and Chris, the red flags are going to manifest itself differently for you, as Seth said. So what kind of things do you guys look at?
Yeah, and so I can kind of kick this off and kind of what Seth and Alma have kind of been talking about a little bit earlier about tracing funds on the public blockchain. This is one of the biggest tools, that we have in our arsenal. And I would encourage anybody who's kind of interested in this topic in general to look up the case of Welcome to Video, which was a 2019 case where, law enforcement, through their hard work, were able to identify a child pornography ring, identify the Bitcoin addresses that were used to collect and send payments for that service, and then follow that back to exchanges, identify the individuals who are participating, and ended up arresting over 300 individuals. So, having the ability to identify particular addresses and see the flow of funds into our platform is an incredible tool for us to say, quite easily, hey, this person's receiving money from an entity that we don't like, that is illegal, and is something that needs to stop. Another kind of point to touch on, while we don't have physical retail offices, we do have a full and robust KYC program. And, while we deal with a unique asset class in cryptocurrency, our customers are the same types of customers that any other financial institution is going to deal with. So, an LLC that's dealing with crypto is still an LLC, right? They have members, they have business operations. Collecting this information, understanding who they are, how they intend on using their accounts is critical to our job of identifying, people who are up to no good.
Yeah, and just to interject here for the folks who aren't really understand the concept of blockchain visibility. Imagine in your head if every $1 or $20 bill in your wallet has a little GPS sticker on it so that you can see exactly where it's gone. And you might have other attributes to a wallet that it's sent to that lets you know who that is, as Chris was talking about. So that's the traceability element. Court, what are some of the things Coinbase is doing?
Yeah. So I just wanted to plus one Chris's comment on the welcome to video case. There's a fascinating case and like really excellent work by law enforcement, and also to talk about the importance of EDD and really understanding your customers. And I think to that point on like the KYC and the IDV side, so identity verification, when an investigator identifies like common patterns in transaction activity and dives into those details, there can also be indicators to look for in self-taken photos. So these can be things like common backgrounds or other people in the background, or perhaps like office-looking type of environments with lots of computers.
So you have people actually looking for that stuff.
Yeah, so I would say that like they're not dispositive alone, like those facts, like you could just to your wife on the couch when you open your account or something. But when you're viewing something in the context of an investigation, and there's other things that you're looking at, they can provide context or serve as a red flag. We also have users that provide notes with particular transactions, and those can be another source of information that we use to pick up through a keyword transaction monitoring scenario that has all of the different slang terms and list of horrible things that users can put into a transaction note, and then from that we can alert on them, add addresses to our internal block list so that no one else can transact with them, and then file a SAR, get information in the hands of law enforcement.
And just to kind of
go ahead,
tack on to that, because it's interesting, especially on the ATM side with KYC, because we've mentioned it a few times. DigitalMint, we collect ID for every single transaction. It's $0 to whatever you would like to transact. We're going to have an ID on file. And the industry is heading in that direction because they realize that the activity, especially the activity we're talking about today, is lower threshold or lower dollar value. So what we're able to do is take the KYC information we have, so the ID, and compare it to known records, and then the phone number, compare that to phone numbers used on Craigslist and escort services. So using that KYC information is vital, but it's also important to have it at these lower dollar thresholds because that's where a lot of this activity is happening.
And look, a lot of the folks listening to this may not realize that money transmitters, which is how your businesses are regulated under the Bank Secrecy Act, actually don't have a regulatory requirement to get ID until $3,000. And so it's very proactive to get ID at $1. And like you said, Seth, that's a valuable way to actually make the rest of your transaction monitoring and investigation work easier, I think.
Yeah, and to that point, right, to Seth's point on the dollar value, a lot of the transactions, particularly when you're looking at things like CSAM, like you're not going to get above an MSB SAR filing threshold for one transaction. So it's important to have the ability to, not just discount everything below 2,000 when you're dealing with high risk activity like that.
So Court, that leads to a good question. So you have these lower threshold transactions. What kind of other things will flag this to Coinbase or to Bittrex or DigitalMint as a potential human trafficking or child exploitation transaction? Because you can't be looking at all transactions for $300. So what other kinds of things will cause an investigation into this?
Yeah, I can start. So it goes to the analytics point. So as you were mentioning earlier when you were unpacking this, different analytics providers will label certain wallet addresses with particular risk tags. So that could be good. This is an exchange. This is a wallet provider. This is something innocuous, or it could be bad. This is something associated with terror finance, with CSAM, with theft or money laundering or carding or any of the other listed bad things. So CSAM and trafficking can be one of those labels that you can set your controls to alert on either directly or through indirect exposure as well.
Do you want to talk about what indirect exposure is? Just
Sure.
so folks know.
Yeah. So direct exposure is just how it sounds. It is a transaction from a particular address directly with, in our case, Coinbase. Indirect exposure would be going beyond that instant transaction to look at the transactions that preceded it. As long as that transaction wasn't with another service like a Bittrex or a Coinbase or a DigitalMint, you can understand if there's risk associated with that, you can use that information to inform your investigation or your alerting controls.
So that's the GPS sticker part that, your direct client may be fine, but he or she only gets transactions from wallets associated with human trafficking or terrorist financing.
Right.
Yeah. Chris, I know you have some good thoughts to add here too.
Yeah. Being kind of a digital native company, we also have access to a lot of kind of geographic data. So looking at IP addresses for customers who, so upfront we collect, photo of the individual, their identification, address information. If we see some IP activity that doesn't appear to make sense given the information we know about the customer, this will raise some flags for us. We also it recently kind of had a case where, pulling all of this together, utilizing kind of IP activity, as well as the selfies and the photos of IDs we found, were able to identify individuals who, different individuals were creating accounts around the same time. But when we looked at them all together, it's the same guy with these bright green pants taking a picture of the ID, when he was going to verify the identity of the individual that created the account. So, we were able to identify those accounts before they were even able to conduct any transactions and shut them all down. So, there are a lot of effective tools that are out there, and having kind of the great investigators that we have at Bittrex within our program, makes my job a lot easier as a manager. Pulling all of that together and getting out the SARs and offboarding the bad actors.
So we used to say back when I was an enforcement lawyer that we only caught the dumb crooks. And that's kind of an example, right?
Yeah.
Use your bright green pants in every single cell. Seth, you have a really interesting story about how you've measured the impact of some of the controls in this area that you've implemented. Do you want to talk about what those controls were and how they're working?
Yeah, so I want to say it was probably about 2 years ago. We were actually talking to shameless plug at ATCC and Aaron and the team over there, and we're trying to figure out, because we couldn't really detect this activity. We were made aware by law enforcement in conversations with victims just through industry conversations that it was happening at ATMs. We just couldn't figure out how to detect it. So our best method was to figure out what data points we had that we could directly attribute to whether it's escort services or CSAM or any of that. And the best method we found was just taking every phone number that's ever been used in our machines and just scanning it across every web scraping tool we could find that had all the phone numbers used on escort services. So we started doing that, and we started investigating the hits that we had, whether it was one account being used for a bunch of different escort ads around the country, or just a direct payment there from just one individual paying. And we started building out kind of a dichotomy between, are they, we'll call them willing participants in this activity, or are they being coerced? And then from there, took all the wallets that they were sending to, which were unnamed, unattributed, small dollar value wallets, and just started clustering them together and then branching out. So saying any customer that's ever sent to this cluster, investigate as if they have an escort ad out there, regardless of if their phone numbers used. Then just kind of building out a network. And what we've seen is for good or bad, a drastic decrease in the activity at our machines from when we brought these controls. So it's been a substantial percentage decrease from 2 years ago to month over month. I think last month we had about 2 hits total.
That's great.
So it's showing the controls are working. Unfortunately, we can't really help law enforcement as much as we once were able to. But yeah, it definitely shows that if you get creative, you can build controls that are able to detect it and prevent it on your platform.
And even if you're, there's a lot of criminal proceeds. If you close down one area, it goes somewhere else. But that disruption itself is useful to law enforcement till they figure out what to do next. And sometimes then they have to go to an avenue where they're going to be easier to find, or just makes it harder for them or more expensive for them to move the proceeds around. And there's some value in that too. But, hey,
Yeah,
that's
it's actually
a great story.
To like Chris's point, where we always see kind of, I don't want to say entertaining things, but things that are of note to an investigations team. Well, now that we know what wallets are associated to escort ads, we just blacklist them. So you can't send there, but we still flag it. We still collect ID. So what we see often is customers scan their ID. So we know who the customer is, scan a wallet that comes up as this wallet's been rejected. They know what they're doing. Now we know what they're doing, but then they don't realize that DigitalMint controls hundreds of machines. So then those go down the road to another DigitalMint machine, scan their ID, scan the rejected wallet, and we'll just watch it kind of pile up. Where like I think we've had one that's in double-digit instances now of them doing the same activity. But yeah, it makes our lives a bit easier.
It does, and that's a lot of good information to send to law enforcement for sure. So look, I think the short answer is, while blockchain technology, can and is, like all currency and assets used for money laundering and bad purpose, there are a lot of technology solutions to a technology problem. Now, that said, Court, what are some of the challenges that you face as an industry in identifying human trafficking that are probably very similar to what banks and traditional financial institutions and MSBs are facing too, just to be fair?
Yeah, so I think from our view, this is where we really see the value of a public-private partnership with law enforcement. Those efforts really come into play here. So if there's specific information provided by law enforcement that can help us identify additional victims and additional threads for both Coinbase investigations teams as well as law enforcement agencies to pull. So our global intelligence team is our team that's just dedicated to managing Coinbase's relationships with the law enforcement community, both domestically and internationally. And they'll do sort of dedicated sprint efforts with law enforcement where they focus on a particular topic. Human trafficking could be one. Certain types of scams can be another. And that can result in additional information that can get into the hands of the investigations team that files SARs. It can, potentially identify, other connected victims to whatever is being investigated. And we also have a special investigations team as well that's charged with, longer form investigations that can, of course, be referred for SAR filing and but are also used to identify areas where we could look at potential additional controls. So I think, that's, at least from the Coinbase view, that's one thing that we look at when we try to address some of the challenges associated with activity that's sort of difficult to pinpoint, in addition to the controls that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and Seth, I know that you have some thoughts about how law enforcement could help you with some of these challenges, and then we'll talk to Chris.
It's a help us help you type thing. That's what I always say. So yeah, like I was kind of referencing earlier, what we want is to help law enforcement the best we can. And typically, if it's coming to human trafficking victims, letting law enforcement know where the victim is a crucial part of this investigation. But at the same time, we run a financial institution, so we have to stay within our risk tolerance. We have to de-risk illicit activity off our platform. So what we always recommend or request from law enforcement is if we are making you aware of something that we believe is coerced human trafficking-esque activity, to have us in writing or in some formal capacity tell us to keep the account open. So that way you as law enforcement know where the activity is occurring. Us as DigitalMint have something that says we're keeping this account open on the request of law enforcement, and we can kind of in tandem work this investigation together for the ultimate beneficial outcome that everyone's hoping for. But yeah, it's oftentimes we can't get that request, so unfortunately we have to shut the account down and watch people or watch the activity go elsewhere, and can't really help from there.
Right. And then sort of the investigation step at another institution kind of has to start all over. Or it might go to, say, an ATM company that's not as well controlled as yours, and they might get away with it. So all you law enforcement folks in the audience, some good advice, I think, to help all of us do a better job. Chris, what are some of the challenges you face? Oh, sorry, Seth, go ahead.
I was just gonna say we offer law enforcement the draft of what they can send us, so it's not even you have to write it.
Hey, you make their job really easy. That's terrific.
Yeah, we're happy to provide a template.
That's great.
Yeah, so I think at Bittrex, we encounter a lot of the same problems that traditional financial institutions have when it comes, especially to the child pornography stuff. These are small transactions that aren't necessarily going to get pulled up in our algorithmic alerting systems. The advantage that we have is our blockchain analytics services, which are great and can make things super easy, but that's only as good as the information that's out there. So, these public-private relationships, groups like ATCC who do an amazing job kind of identifying these child porn rings, these human trafficking rings, and do the hard work of identifying the addresses on blockchain that we need to pay attention to, is something that's kind of critical, helping them out wherever we can. I'll also say, AML is the classic kind of cat and mouse game. So as we get more sophisticated in our AML capabilities, the criminals will get more sophisticated in trying to evade them. But I think, one of the things that I've found most helpful is having, colleagues at, Coinbase like Court, at DigitalMint like Seth. When we see something going on in our platform, moving off onto another platform, we can use 314B to share information, kind of tip off that, hey, these are transactions that you guys probably need to take a look at, even though they might not necessarily trigger some kind of alerting system.
And just so folks know, so Section 314B is a really innovative part of the USA Patriot Act that was passed after September 11th, which allows institutions to share information with each other without violating any privacy laws, so that Chris can pick up the phone and call Court and say, hey, we're seeing this activity move to Coinbase, so you might want to take a look at it, or to Seth. And so it's a really valuable and important piece of the regulatory scheme that I think really helps in human trafficking and other areas of criminal activity as well.
Yeah, I would just say it's effective and productive too. There's some really good investigative work that comes out of both inbound and outbound 314B through our institution. To the point on sophistication that Chris was making, I think we're seeing a lot of the rings that are linked to trafficking activity have gotten quite sophisticated. We saw one that there was the ring set up a malicious DApp, that a decentralized app that impersonated a pretty well-known crypto market making company. So the victim goes to that website. It's not the right website, but it looks very, very shiny and legitimate, and it's very easy to fall victim to something like that. And just saying Google this company, and they do, and the first result they see is very legitimate crypto market making company. So they've gotten
Is that a scam, Court? What happens when somebody signs on to the malicious DApp?
Yeah, so this was a scam. Like you know, send funds to here, and
Oh,
you know,
and
it
they
wasn't.
just steal it.
Yeah, this particular you know, investment scam. But you know, when we unpacked it further, it did appear to be something that was much tougher. Yeah.
And I will say also about, you know, the kind of cycles of criminals getting more sophisticated. One of the, you know, other benefits that we have working on blockchain is everything is permanent. So, you know, just because a criminal is sophisticated now, you know, they had to learn at some point. So maybe some of their earlier activity, you know, they weren't so good about, you know, moving funds in a way that they couldn't be traced, or, you know, taking whatever kind of protective measures they need to do to disguise their identity. You know, if we get kind of a new attribution on an address, you know, even if that transaction occurred 2014, 2015, you know, we'll get fresh alerts on it. And, you know, we could potentially get a guy who, you know, at the time thought, you know, hey, Bitcoin, it's anonymous, I can do whatever I want now. You know, before he realized that, like, no, you know, you're going to be in some trouble. So, you know, it definitely kind of adds another dimension here, where we were able to kind of look back and pull in more people than we would otherwise be able to.
Yeah, again, and I apologize to folks who might know a lot of this, but I'm assuming a more basic level. So this is like if you have a customer who seems perfectly fine when you onboard them, and 2 years later they're indicted for, you know, for fraud, then you go back and look at their transactions. That's what happens with the wallet attributions. You could have a wallet that doesn't trigger anything, and then later the blockchain analytics companies understand that this wallet is in fact associated with child exploitation. So you, as Chris said, you get that alert and you can go back and look at the prior activity. And again, that's not something that happens with the actual fiat currency, although it can happen with the customer. So it's actually, it also makes it hard to clear all the alerts because they keep coming, but it really is an interesting mitigant to law enforcement and the compliance community when you're dealing with digital assets being used for criminal proceeds.
Yeah, and to Chris's point, it's interesting to watch people that make that one slip up mistake. So we've had a number, not like a few, I guess, instances where there was almost no way we would have ever caught someone in this human trafficking related activity or organized kind of pimp-esque activity. But there's just one transaction where they decide they were going to send to a carding site instead of an unhosted wallet first. And once we have investigation open for them trying to send to a carding site, if the red flags are there for a different typology, we're going to investigate that. So we've had instances where people just trying to do that one transaction directly to a carding site or to a fraud shop, it's like kind of just starts the investigation off, and we're able to detect a completely different thing.
So you guys make me miss my investigation days because this is the fun stuff, right? And look, I know it sounds really corny, but I do feel like we're just helping keep the world a little bit safe, and excellent work, because I think it's wonderful, and it really helps a lot of people with what you're doing and what you're reporting. This is when I wish we were live and we could get questions, because I'm sure there are a lot of them. But I think it's we're about out of time. So I want to thank you all for being such a great panel. I think the folks tuning in probably learned a lot, and I'm sure you know, we could make ourselves available to answer a few questions if anybody has them. So with that, thank you, and I hope everyone has a nice weekend, because it's Friday afternoon here.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.